My name is Kelly Punsloff-Curry, and I'm here today to talk to you about the initial stages of costume design and the process that we go through to get a show through the beginning stages and into the research. Today, for this example, we're going to be using the play One Flea Spare by Naomi Wallace. Are you guys excited? I hope so. All right, let's go. So when someone approaches you about a costume design, it's not always about jumping into the visuals. There's a lot of prep work that comes before that. So today, we are going to talk about some of that work, including going through the process of reading the play and how many different times we read it, talking about collaboration, and then finally, we're gonna land on research and all of the different types of research that you need to do to get yourself really grounded. But before we do any of that, the first thing you need to ask yourself is, what is the purpose of costume design? What are you trying to accomplish? And the one thing you cannot let go of, the one thing you need to remember as you go through this process, is the design must help tell the story without confusing or overshadowing it. Every decision you make needs to help inform the story, inform the action, inform about the characters. It needs to tell the story. If it doesn't tell the story, a costume choice has no business being in the show. It's a good way to give yourself a benchmark on some things you might be on the fence about. Ask yourself, does this help tell the story? Does it serve what we are trying to accomplish here? All right, so let's dive in. We start off, we read the play. So the first time you read the play, you want to get the big picture. You want to know what happens. You just need the story. The play we're talking about today is called One Flea Spare by Naomi Wallace. She wrote it in 1997, but was deeply inspired by the Rodney King riots in 1992 in LA. And she said in an interview, it made her think, what would happen if South Central had invaded Beverly Hills? This play is unbelievably timely right now. I'm so excited about it. It takes place during the plague in London in 1665. A wealthy couple is hours away from being allowed to leave their boarded up home from a 28-day quarantine when, for lack of a better term, two stowaways appear. One, Morse, is a 12-year-old girl who claims to be the daughter of their neighbors, who has come down from the attic and infiltrated their home, and then Bunce, a sailor who is escaping from the shipyard so he doesn't get stuck on a naval vessel, comes up from the basement. When the guard sees there are two additional people in the house, he re-boards up the house, and they're quarantined for 28 more days. This play takes place during that 28-day period where you see how their perceptions of themselves are challenged, how their ideas of class and sexuality and all of these things are challenged when you're just confined within four walls. So it's a really interesting piece for this because it's a period piece. It has the potential to be updated, and it'd be really kind of cool to see how you could update it for now. But it really lands on the conflicts of classes. It has a lot of, it's really allegorical. There's a lot of themes of bondage and a child with the breath of an angel coming from the heavens, a sailor coming up from the depths of the home to invade them, and how it works together with all of these characters and how they interact with each other. Also, my favorite, there are a lot of really cool technical challenges in this script. There's an actor who urinates herself on stage. There is a lot of interesting makeup, including burns and scars and a little bit of blood. You know, it's really, there's a lot of cool challenges in it. So we've read the play, we know the story. So what do we do next? Let's read it again. Now that we have the overarching story, now we want to find more about the world of the play, the themes within the play, and any specific costume-related things that may come up. So we find out this play is set in London. We know it's summertime because of some comments someone makes about it being hot. We see that it's about the clashing of the classes. There's a whole part where Snellgrave and Bunce trade shoes on stage, and you see all kinds of themes arise about freedom and bondage and what it means to have your wounds control you versus finding yourself freed of them. There's also a great time, this is a great time to note any costume considerations. Everything from something as simple as a mention of someone rolling up their sleeve to reveal their arm, that informs you that that character has to have long sleeves. You can't put him in something sleeveless. To knowing that Darcy is completely covered up from her neck down to the tips of her fingers, and knowing that Morris urinates herself on stage and also intentionally rips her skirt from the hem all the way to the waist. All kinds of great costume things to make a note. While you're doing this, or after you've done this and you've highlighted the costume things, you can go on and make a costume list. A costume list is a list of every look a character has within the story. So we see that Morris spends most of the time, this is just the first two scenes, in her base costume, which is a dress with pants underneath. Snellgrave has his rich looking outfit, and as it goes along, you see their base looking costume. You can go scene by scene and indicate what people are wearing. It helps you plan. So you can later use this list and break it down further when you create a build pulled by list once you've gotten much farther in the process. But doing this strong prep work on the front end makes your life so much easier. From this costume list, you can create a costume plot. A costume plot is a chart that shows when things are worn. So you've made a list, which is what is worn, and then you make a plot that indicates when things are worn. So it's a chart, and it helps you indicate, base costume, base costume, base costume, and any interesting costume things that come up. The shoe exchange, adjusting bandages, all of this should be notated in this costume chart, not just for your planning now, but when it comes time to get into dress rehearsal, this will be very helpful to the wardrobe crew who may not be familiar with the play the way you are. Guess what? Let's read the play again. This time, I like to read the play to make sure I'm looking at the characters and their inner life and to do a character analysis. When you're looking at the characters, you need to really try to understand everything you can about them based on what they say and also what they don't say, the subtext, all of the things that they seem like offhanded comments but inform their inner life. So everything from, Darcy's a woman, 54, to some of their moral ideals and how that affects how they dress. Every single thing a person wears can communicate something about them, and that's what we're trying to do. Use every single thing these characters wear to communicate something about them and to inform the audience without them having to say a word. All right, so now we have read this play a couple of times, 3 times at least. What do we do now? Now, let's move into collaborating. So for a theoretical project, you might just be collaborating with yourself and asking yourself these questions. But theater is not a solo art. Remember, it's not just the costumes that are on the stage. They work with the lighting and with the set and all building this world that the director is creating in rehearsal with the actors. So it's important to make sure that you are collaborating with your colleagues. And in the early parts of the process, in either production meetings or design meetings, you'll meet with the director and you'll find out such things as, what's the world of the play? Are we setting it exactly as is? Are we moving it into a different time or space? Are we keeping it in the original time period, but giving some leeway to play with things that may be from different time periods to help enrich the story? Because what are we doing? Everything we're doing is helping to tell that story. It's good to talk to the director about any themes he wants to highlight. So oftentimes you can use costumes to help enhance the theme of a play. Like with color. You can have a character who begins in very rich looking fancy clothes and slowly have his costume be stripped down to nothing as you discover his social status is indeed stripped down to nothing within this world of the play. And also you need to talk about, are there any costume specific actions that will need to be rehearsed, because those typically are decisions that need to be made first, and make sure they get into the rehearsal process so that the actors have time to work with what they need. In this particular show, there's an entire scene that talks about Snellgrave giving Bunce his shoes to try on to see what it's like to be rich. This is something that will need to be rehearsed and not something you could just throw at them in dress rehearsal and say, I know you were practicing in sneakers, but hey, here you go, try this. All right, so one more thing about collaboration. It's not a one-time thing. It's not a single production meeting. It is best when you collaborate if you make sure the communication is consistent. So even if it's scary, if you have a question, ask. If you see a problem, look for a solution. Don't just point out the problem, flip your hair and walk away. Look for that solution. Work with others to find that solution. Solve that problem so we can tell this story. If you need help, seek it out. And if you have information that can be helpful, share it. Finally though, the most important thing, hope isn't a strategy and neither is mind reading. You cannot expect people to know what you're thinking. You need to be able to communicate what you're thinking. All right, so from here, we've collaborated. We know about the world of the play and what the director is trying to build. Finally, let's get into visuals. So, research, it's finally time. So think about research. The first thing you need to remember is there is such a thing as primary research. Primary research is anything from the time period. Paintings, inventories, photos, drawings, anything like that from the time period. Secondary sources is anything that's one step removed. If it's one step removed, it has someone's design layer applied on top of it. So like this photo you see here, you have Betty Davis as Queen Elizabeth. It's an example of secondary research. And then you have an actual painting of Queen Elizabeth. So this would be your example of primary research. Whenever possible, land on primary research. It will make everything you choose specific and much more rich. So for our purposes, we are going to look at the research of this play as if we were going to be producing it during the time period. And just like when we began the process of reading the script, first, we start with some broad research. We research the world of the play. What is the world these characters live in? Finding images. Here are images that show some art that was created during the Black Plague in London. How people were seeing this. Some pictures of cartoons and all things like this that help build that world. When we get from understanding the overall world, then we can begin to narrow it down. And then we start pulling research for individual characters, images that help inform what you want these characters to look like. So like these images for Darcy, we see the basic shapes. We see some sleeve options that we can pull from. We see the dark color, we see the coveredness of this woman over here with her glove with the gauntlet on it. All of these things you can pull from, and it can help you inform when you create a rough sketch. So from here, we're going to pause with this. But the one thing you need to know, and the last thing I want to say about research in general before we end, is that costumes are a visual communication. You cannot communicate without visuals. In the costume world, pictures are so important. You can describe what you want something to look like, but unless you have it, photo images, paintings, research that supports what you want to talk about, not just pictures you've seen that you're trying to describe, pictures that are in front of the people with whom you're discussing, where you can both be looking at it, pointing and discussing the things, it doesn't do you a damn bit of good without visuals. Visuals are so important in this visual medium, so make sure that you always go back to showing pictures that help express what you want to do, and also go back to our number one